yes, there's going to be some sort of action against gold. There's going to have to be. I mean, how high does the total debt pile get? It's 275 trillion now or something. What are you going to go to a quadrillion or something? I mean, okay, how high does it get before you look at measly gold with 11 trillion total valuation in the world with no counterparty risk? It's going to go much higher. And then once it does, it's going to be a problem because it's a truth serum for the overall system. We know this is what's going to happen. So while you're still waiting for that to happen, play that. There's your trade. And when that's over, there'll be something else to do. We don't know what it is now, but we don't need to know what it is now.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance and Reluctant Preppers. We have a returning guest. E.B. Tucker is the author of Why Gold, Why Now? He joins us again to answer viewers' questions and to talk to us about how we can address and accept the realities that we're being confronted with in today's world. Today is Wednesday, July 1st, 2020. E.B., thanks for coming back on again.
Thanks for having me.
You and I have been having a lively conversation in anticipation of this interview about what happens when life throws us curveballs. And oh my gosh, we've been thrown probably a record number of curves in the first half of this year. This is the first day of the second half of 2020. So are there any that stand out to you right now about the most unexpected or perhaps unpleasant things that happened to you or in your world or in all of our world this year, and how you're facing those and how you're adapting to those?
Well, the interesting analogy with the curveball, I feel like we're standing at the plate and the pitch is only halfway. I mean, we're watching this thing curve in slow motion. And the question is, will we adjust our swing or will we wish it was a fastball? I mean, that's really at the end of this what you'll be asking yourself. One of the things that I think we should talk about right away is before all this stuff started going down and the 12 trillion and government, injections into the economies to prevent recession. And as we know, these things are abnormalities, and eventually you pay for them later. But right now, what we're watching is 12 trillion in there. Everyone is a stock trader. I can't believe the number of people that I'll run into in town here that they're buying this biotech or that biotech and Robinhood accounts, and this one did this. Well, what does the company do? I don't know, but it's very hot right now, and it just reminds you of all these other times that you've been around. But if you had asked me in the beginning of the year what I thought gold would do, I would have said it'll hit 1900, and then we'll readdress, and I still think that. But what I've done is I want to show you. This is the gold price today, okay? So
nice.
This is $1,800, all right? And the reason why I got this out for you today to show you is because I don't think many people know what $1,800 looks like. I mean, that right here gets you an ounce of gold, assuming you don't pay any dealer premiums or anything like that. And this is $20. This is $21 bills. And this is what it used to cost to get an ounce of gold, right? Like when my grandpa was a teenager, this right here would get you an ounce of gold. In fact, as you probably know, they had gold certificates that were $20 bills, and they, you just walk in and you trade them. And this is an ounce of gold. So this is a U.S. Eagle, 1 ounce, really nice U.S. Eagle, and the ounce of gold has not changed since the $20 price. Nothing's changed with the ounce of gold. And so the reason why I think it's important we look at that is that stack of money can get infinitely taller. I mean, there's no, and so standing around and saying, well, it shouldn't be this and this shouldn't be happening, and I don't want to wear the mask, and what's going to happen to the economy, and what about all these Fed programs? Yeah, well, guess what? The stack is going to get bigger, and the question is, what are you going to do about it?
Yeah, and that's we just got word not minutes ago that the Freedom Fest 2020 that I have been inviting our viewers to join me at in Las Vegas, Nevada next month. Well, actually now it's this month, July, just got canceled in response to basically insurmountable policy obstacles that have been put in place. No gatherings over the size of 49 people, that kind of thing, in Las Vegas and in Nevada, and so that event has been curtailed, as have been many others. We were supposed to appear at a Oxford Club Investment U in Carlsbad, California in April. It got rescheduled to August. Now it's canceled as well. So we will be having the Sprott Symposium on Natural Resources later this month, July 22nd, because that's a virtual conference. So that one is a little bit immune to this disruption. But you're right, there's been any number of major disruptions. And it's interesting, your perspective is that as all this flash and chaos and stuff happens, gold sits right there in the center, unchanged through it all. That's been that way through history. And you brought that up partly in your book, Why Gold, Why Now? You want to just touch on that as far as the role that gold has played in our ancestors' lives and lives of civilizations up to date, and it continues to play, whether our popular banking denies it or not.
Exactly. And so a lot of times people get hung up on all this history, like they say, well, the Peloponnesian War and the Lydian Empire. Okay, look, all that stuff is the same as now. I mean, people haven't really changed that much. The natural temptation to manipulate and abuse the power of coinage, it's always going to be there, and it's going to be there 1,000 years from now, even if the type of coinage changes. And so for us, I think it's more important to look back, just say, in the 1920s, 100 years, okay, if your ancestor wanted to give you $1,000 today and they put $1,000 in an envelope, that $1,000 doesn't buy you much, whereas $1,000 worth of gold is about $85,000 today. And so gold has been this quiet refuge the whole time. It's not very exciting. I mean, let me just be clear with you and your viewers that gold going to 1900 in the coming months, it's not really that exciting. I mean, it's only $125 roughly from where we are today, and it's a low double-digit return. So it's not something that you would eagerly jump at for the chance to multiply your money. There are other things to do. I mean, I'm on the board of the fastest growing gold royalty company. I helped start the company. It's called Metallo Royalty, ticker symbol MTA. I talk about that in the book. I talk about what a royalty is. Well, a royalty gives you 30 or 40 years or 20 years, whatever the case may be, of exposure to a mine without any obligation to go do any work at that mine. So you take, say, 1% as a mineral claim on that asset. You take 1% of every ounce that ever comes out of the ground. So when you own the royalty company stock and gold goes up $120, what happens is that you pull the value of 20 years of production in the future back to today. And that's worth a lot. And so I'm always telling people, gold is not really an investment. It's an asset. It's not something that you go in 1920 and say, I'm going to buy $1,000 worth of gold so I can make a lot of money. The fact of the matter is that $1,000 in 1920 was a serious chunk of change. Okay, so the point is that $1,000 in gold back then preserved that money. Now, if you had bought $1,000 worth of gold in 1920 and you bought a little home stake mining stock or something like that, okay, now you're talking about an investment, and that implies that you'd be up on the timing and the implications of the investment. But my point is, in the book, I'm telling people gold, you can't see gold as an investment. I mean, certainly it meets the asset advisor is going to say it's an investment, okay, whatever. But it's not really an investment, it's an asset, and there's a big difference.
How about the change that was put into place last year by international banks at Basel in Switzerland, talking about it becoming reclassified as a Tier 1 asset? What's the significance of that to you?
Well, I mean, finally, because think about it. I mean, it's so liquid. I mean, you gold in the middle of an absolute economic crisis event. You can sell gold in any currency. I mean, you can sell it in Japanese yen or British pounds or whatever you want. I mean, it's fungible is the word we would use for that in a practical sense. But finally, the Basel guys said, well, I guess, I mean, it's just as liquid as any of this other stuff, and it's a turning point there. I don't know. I start to wonder if it's something to do with Chinese building, such a hoard, right, of gold. I mean, you have to start wondering, okay, has this been an issue with some of the new large holders of gold? Has this been, the Italians have a lot of gold, for example, assuming they've held on to it all. And do you have some of these people that say, listen, I mean, we have to we have to have credit for this because, we can't take any more. You've stuffed us to the gills with T-bills and treasury notes. Like we can't take any more of this stuff. So I mean, it certainly meets that definition. But more importantly, for the average person, it meets that definition. I mean, you look at your balance sheet. In my personal opinion, you should consider the gold cash. I mean, if you're holding the gold and you have some cash and you say, boy, I'm a little low on cash, I think you should consider the gold cash because you can instantly sell it. I mean, and it's not going to be affected by negative interest rates. Even better, because that's going to be a big problem. Like, if you hold a large amount of money in the bank, you're soon, I think you'll pay to hold it there. Whereas with the gold, you won't pay anything other than storage fees, and storage fees aren't that high. I mean, you can figure it out. It's something that it's a bridge you can cross. But yeah, gold is definitely a tier 1 asset in my book, and I think that if you look at yourself like you're running your own little empire, which I'm always encouraging people to do. You're going to be an empire builder. You're building an empire, then you're managing the empire. Yeah, gold is a piece of that, and it's a tier 1 asset.
Something that fits with something we were talking about before we started the recording. We were talking about dealing with reality, confronting the actual reality of what's happening rather than dissipating a lot of our personal energy and power on fuming and fretting and railing about this shouldn't be happening, this isn't the way things should be, rather than this is the way things are happening and what am I going to do about it. It's interesting because that depends on what version of reality you're aware of. And that's why the first part of our tagline is awareness, preparedness, and bullion sales, is because helping people be aware and prepared. So back to Basel III, I'm told that the World Central Bank leaders who met in Switzerland in middle of 2019 to finally declare this rule that gold should be 100% counted as a tier 1 asset had been front running that decision for 18 months, acquiring record levels, all the major world central banks acquiring record levels of gold a year and a half leading into that. So they were accepting and confronting a reality they knew about that the rest of us didn't know about yet.
Sure.
So that's another thing that you talk about in your book, Why Gold, Why Now, is what is really going on that we need to be aware about that most people really aren't. So can you talk to us about why has it been so invincibly ignorant? This idea of invincible ignorance has been out there. Just a lot of people feel like there's just no way that they would have found out about this stuff. So where can people turn to find out what they need to know?
Yeah, so, okay, it's a superb question because one of my early mentors when I was reading and studying and learning in this realm was always talking about bent blades of grass, okay? So what he meant was look at the grass bent over and it tells you which way the wind is blowing. So
in our part of the state, you actually see the trees and the telephone poles are actually bent in that direction.
Bent trees, yeah. So why would you want to see the way the wind is blowing? Well, it's like Gretzky said, where the puck is going. I mean, that's where the game is, right? So I mean, and when I say game, I mean that's where life is. I mean, life is change. That's what people need to realize. And when you're in the markets full time as a professional, you have no choice but to accept that. So once you accept that life is change, then instead of gripping on to every single thing that happens and saying, no, this can't happen because I decided that this is how it was going to be and it can't happen. Instead, you take a deep breath and you awareness. I mean, awareness is the most important thing in all of life, with your relationships, with your money, with the economy. I mean, the economy is a force of nature. You can try to suppress it. You can try to stop things from happening. But all you do is you push that energy into something else, okay? And so instead of saying they should not do that, I mean, in fact, I consider the S word to me as should, okay? Anytime I'm upset about something, I can almost guarantee you that I'm telling myself it shouldn't be this way. And we all do it. The question is, how long do we do it? So I try to limit that to 15 minutes maximum, even for the most extreme circumstances. If I go longer than that, I'm very disappointed in myself. But the thing is that the bent blades of grass or the bent trees or whatever, this is the critical thing to look for. Now, how does that relate to Basel? I'll tell you. people that were watching, for example, in 2016, I helped found a gold royalty company. It wasn't an accident. It wasn't like, we were waiting in line and it was our turn to start it. It was because my partner, Brett Heath, is the CEO, and we run a gold equity asset management company years ago, said, this is the turning point, period. December 2015 was the ultimate low.
It was.
We've already turned the corner. People don't notice. They think gold is stupid. I mean, we went to PDAC and you have, grown men in the twilight of their career with their face in their hands saying, I can't find financing. We can't do it. We can't go on, and we're sell for any price. Okay. That was the sentiment in the gold market. Meanwhile, the Russians, for example, were responding to sanctions by cutting spending, generating a budget surplus, investing in infrastructure, building foreign currency reserves, buying gold. I mean, okay, so the Chinese, what were they doing? You can't export any gold that's produced there. They're the largest producer. Then they're importing gold on top of what they're producing, which at the time was like 400 tons a year. Who knows how much gold they have? I have no clue. Okay, so you look around and then you look at the mining sector. Everyone is shutting down all these mines. Gold will never come back. I mean, this is all this bent blades of grass. So you're liquidating supply, okay, and the gold price has begun to turn, and then you have this behavior. So was it really hidden from us, or did we just not know how to look?
Our family was on vacation several years ago, and we were in the Black Hills of South Dakota, and we were trying to take in all the iconic sites. We went to Mount Rushmore, we went to Crazy Horse, we went to Bear Country, USA, we went to Reptile Gardens, and we took a tour of a historical gold mine in Keystone, South Dakota. And during the tour, so we're down underground, and we're looking at all the old equipment, the old rusty stuff and everything. The tour guide made a comment that there was an operating gold mine across the street, but she said, but they've stopped operating because the price of gold is so low, it's not even worth taking it out of the ground anymore. And I just thought, oh, that's interesting. But there was a smack you in the face moment, which like, wait a minute. If the price of something is so low right now that the producers of it are abandoning, even ceasing operations, that's probably an extreme. I mean, Warren Buffett talks about, volatility creates mispricing creates opportunities. But it wasn't until years later that I had my forehead smack moment about, she basically was handing me a gold nugget right there, and I didn't even recognize it.
Now let's talk about the opposite of that. The next time you hear some guy that says after he ran a self-driving car venture that lost $500 million and ran a cannabis company that lost $500 million, but now he's going to find gold in the bottom of the ocean, and all he needs is $500 million in capital to do it. I mean, that fictitious person will appear at some point in the gold market. When he or she does, it's ding, ding, ding. Okay, wait a minute. Maybe it's time that I sell some of my gold stocks, maybe even some of my gold, because that's the other extreme. So we're talking about the bottom, which is liquidation of assets, company failure, no premium takeovers, like just folding into each other, distress of all types, all the sellers are out, even the strongest buyers are wondering if they've lost their mind. That's the bottom, okay? But to let people understand that this goes in a wave is that you got to also say the top. I mean, maybe the top in stocks is Robinhood people buying bankrupt shares of Hertz for $5. Mm-hmm. Think about that. Literally, they're worth zero because the bondholders are only going to recover pennies on the dollar. So the stockholders get nothing, and Hertz comes out and says we're going to sell a bunch of shares to these people while we can, and we're going to put a disclaimer that says they'll likely be worthless. And people just, they buy them because maybe something will happen. This is the type of behavior that you see. Now, let's go back in history for a minute just to show people that sometimes you might have emotions about today that cloud your thinking, because when you look back, 80 or 90 years, you have no emotion because you weren't alive, okay? Or if you were alive, you were so small that you didn't know what was happening. So there's a great book about a guy called Benjamin Roth in the Depression who kept a journal about his stock buying and his feelings. Now, I encourage everyone that invests their own money to keep a journal, because what happens is you just make small notations. July 1, the gold price is here, and this is my instinct right now, and whatever. Or I bought this stock today, and here's why. And then you go over time, and you can look back and see what you were thinking so that you can really analyze your thinking. Now, Roth did this back then. So you should read this thing. It's a great book. It's available on Amazon. It could be out of print, but people should get one. Okay, he says by the time stocks reached a bottom, because like the 1929, they went down and then they pretty much came all the way back up, just like they've done now. I mean, 29 crash was not when people were jumping out of windows. It was the ensuing years where people kept trying to pick a bottom. So these stocks would come back halfway and then slam again. And he would say, I thought it was time to get the insurance stocks, and I bought some, and they went to lower than anyone could realize. By the time they reached the ultimate bottom, 3 or 4 years after the original crash, they were so cheap. The PEs were like 4 or 5, dividend yields were 5, 6, 7%. And people said, no way will I ever buy stocks again, period. And Roth writes about it. He says, nobody had any money left. So my point is that this happens. We're talking about the extremes because the gold bottom in 2015 December was an extreme. I mean, believe me, I had some resource stocks that I sold then to take tax losses. And I remember thinking the sector is finished. I mean, I've been in this business at that point for 10 years. I remember myself thinking this has been a terrible decision to be, so it affects all of us. Okay. But it's something that you can study for all of life. Now, how much farther do we have to go? A long way, because I wrote the book because people still think gold is illegal. Not your viewers, but if you take a survey of 100 average Americans of reasonable intelligence, which I would say like college-educated Americans, I bet you can't find 3 of them that even think gold is a good idea. And out of those 3, I bet none of them know where to get it.
Yep, it's really remarkable. So the harvest is large and the laborers are few. When we go out there trying to educate people, I get a biased sampling because people who reach out to us calling in and asking about purchasing metals, they're already thinking along those lines, and even they have a lot of questions. But when I talk to ordinary people that I encounter in life, I run into exactly what you're saying. They don't even know. It's like you're speaking a foreign language. They have no idea what you're talking about. Something you mentioned just a few moments ago about the signs of a frothy market, the top, that kind of thing, the distortions that exist on both ends of that spectrum. But the specific example you gave of somebody who had been serially unsuccessful at large things, it also, just as a point that we're going to be bringing up as a theme, I think, as we start bringing like CEOs of successful mining companies on to interview them, that kind of thing, is look for proven performers, people who have weathered the extremes and the randomness and the volatility and everything, and yet have demonstrated their ability to produce, to be lucky over and over and over again, because the chances are the people, they have a style of thinking, they have a network of contacts, they have a way of looking at information and so on, and distilling what are valuable insights that are uncommonly successful. And basically people who are serially successful, there's often reasons behind that.
Yes, there is a dedication to fundamentals of some sort. And so you kind of say, well, what makes this person tick? What is their metaphysic? I mean, what do they think? What do they do? How do they act? And not saying if you like them or not, just saying, what is behind this success? If they just had a cobalt mining company for 9 years and did nothing, and all of a sudden cobalt went sky high, and then their stock went up. I mean, that's not really a fundamental reason for success. Okay, that's luck. But to your point, like with Metalla, we've done 18 transactions to buy 50 royalties, and each transaction has been a stair step higher. And share price. And the analyst will ask me, well, how do we know you have sufficient pipeline to keep growing before the gold price takes off? Well, I don't know. Maybe we just were lucky 18 times. This is dumb luck. So, I mean, it's like for 42 months. I mean, what? Come on, man. Think about it. Like, how do you think we did all that? You can't. There's no Zillow listing for royalties. You can't just go around and just buy them up. And if you call investment banks to buy them, you're going to pay full price. You can't do that. These are complicated transactions where we've used shares to buy the royalties. And to do that, you have to really be diligent with the management of your shares because, for example, last week we bought a royalty right where you were in South Dakota on a mine called Wharf, which is run by Core Mining. It's one of their most profitable assets. And it's about, I'd say, an hour from Mount Rushmore, and it's even closer to the old Homestake mine, which is right up the road near Deadwood. So basically, when we buy this asset, the guy that owns that royalty, that asset was first discovered in 1974. So I mean, he's in his 80s. So do you think he's going to take stock in a company that's a pink sheet or something? Like, I mean, forget about it, right? So the whole process with him is saying, how do I know that if I sell you this prized possession, which is going to cash flow $120,000 US a month and is going to trade at a really nice premium, how do I know if I sell it to you that I'm going to be safe? And you have to say to him, talk to the other 17 people. Mm-hmm. That's all you can say. I can sit here all day. Words are cheap. So I can sit here all day, but the best thing I could do is give you 17 phone numbers. You call them and they'll tell you what you think. But to your point, you want to look for fundamentals. You want to look at how people carry themselves over the long term, and then you want to look at their track record, and don't beat them up too badly. I mean, sometimes if you're taking a flyer on something, well, I mean, the future is yet to be written. Okay, so I mean, you're going to have to speculate at some point, but usually the guys that have experienced success in business are going to experience more of it.
We've got some questions from viewers we'd like to get to for a few minutes. This one takes us in a serious direction. We've talked about not fighting against the reality that we're confronting, but if the reality we're confronting turns out to be quite chaotic, then what do we see coming ahead? Sportgus.com says, the way things are shaping up, it looks to me like civil war is inevitable, despite who wins the election in November. Will taxes, capital gains taxes, or owning precious metals even matter if food supply chains are completely broken in a state of economic collapse and lawlessness? What should we really be investing in right now?
Well, okay, so look, if you have a large portfolio, you don't just liquidate it and grow a big garden. I mean, it's not practical. I mean, I've been to a place in the Bahamas called Harbor Island. It's a very, very nice place to visit if you've it's near north of Eleuthera. And when I was there, I hung out with some people that owned property there who were telling me that during the Civil War, it was a refuge for wealthy Southerners, who didn't have necessarily skin in the game with the moral issues of the day. Okay, they just didn't want to die. All right, I mean that was the Sherman's running through torching cities. Forget about it, man. I mean, you're not trying to profit off that. You're trying to survive. Okay, so Civil War, I don't know, maybe. I mean, the police department's being disbanded. The restaurants are 90% empty. You can't go into a building without being hit with a spray bottle of sanitizer and that you don't want. What about your right to not have Simple Green sprayed all over you before you walk into the store? It's pretty offensive. Okay. So I mean, this stuff gets old pretty fast. And, the question I asked the restaurateur Sunday night when I was out for dinner was, how long can you survive with no customers? I mean, he knew what I was getting at. They already shrunk the menu by 50% and business is bad. Now, the second derivative of this is sales tax where I live is 8.5%. It's very high. So how long can the city survive when it's spending, millions and millions of dollars to fly choppers around and send police around on horse to write people citations for not wearing masks? And meanwhile, all the businesses are boarded up. So I mean, the viewer's question is right. I can only tell you what I'm doing. Gold to me looks like it's about to become the most valuable asset in the world. And what I mean by that is the most sought after asset in the world. Stocks lose their value very quickly because it becomes a situation where once you pull the rug out from under them, and people start valuing them correctly, that comes apart pretty quickly. Real estate has a problem because you've been buying it for 3 or 4% yield, and now it's 25% empty, and you got plywood over the windows. Okay, so that's a problem. And what gets worse is then the city comes and tells you that you got to install more ramps and you need an elevator, and no one can enter without wearing a shield over their head. And I mean, who can do business in this type of environment, right? So that's a huge problem. So I think always sourcing your own sustenance, okay, is always a good idea. And you don't have to do it completely. I mean, you can always have a supplement to your food supply that you grow yourself, and you can be practical about other things. I mean, I always keep a propane cooker, rice, the ingredients for green curry. I mean, which you can eat as a veggie dish. Okay. And people say, well, that I say, look, man, this is just practical. I mean, this is not to survive a mushroom cloud. There's going to be people in a lot worse situation than me. So you want to see yourself as navigating through the storm, not coming out, super wealthy. I mean, think about the Depression. If you owned $1,000 worth of gold, it was still worth $1,000 when Benjamin Roth said that everybody was killing themselves and had no money. Whereas if you owned 1,000 of stock, it was worth 10 cents on the dollar. Mm-hmm. So the 1,000 in gold, I mean, you didn't make a fortune. You just maintained wealth. That's all you did. And you survived otherwise. And you can definitely, human beings survive. All biological organisms are built to survive, and you will survive. I mean, it will not be a scenario where the race wipes itself out, on the planet. Forget about it. That's science fiction. So you're going to make it. And if you take steps now, you can come out of the other side with a little bit of firm footing, which is as much as you can ask for.
There's a follow-on question from one listener, and we have a related question from another listener. Back to Sportcast 2, he says, when it is all over and the Constitution is irrelevant and we don't have our current rights, do you not think that the next ruling party will just take our precious metals from us? Related question from Jeff Hoyer, who says, Jim Sinclair thinks mining stocks will be nationalized for miners within the United States. Do you think that is likely? So that package of questions all around basically confiscation, seizure, loss of...
Yeah, I definitely think confiscation's coming, but at much higher prices. And the way they'll confiscate this time will be a bit different. It's not like a door-to-door roundup. I mean, in the book, I tell about 1935 or 1933. I tell about my grandfather's mom pulled them into the living room and let them all keep a coin, and kind of go through that in detail and tell my own family's experience with that. I mean, they had a cigar box filled with 19th century coins, and they turned them all in. Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's crazy. So that's going to happen again, but it's going to be different. I look for that in the form of an excise tax on bullion sales, something like that. Remember the AIG bonuses? They said, well, you can keep the bonus, but it's a 99% excise tax. So, okay, great. So that's probably the form that takes. I mean, I would think that if you're going to, probably that's going to happen at much higher prices. And also my suspicion is when it happens, you perhaps might be better off just complying with it, because probably gold goes into a dark period for a while. I mean, my grandpa would tell me if his mother didn't turn the gold in, what would you have done with it? It's kind of a good point. It's a felony to have it, and you have to sit there until 1974. So congratulations, 39 years later or 41 years later, you can finally do something with it. I mean, you might as well just bought stocks or something at that point. So I do think gold becomes the most valuable asset. I do think that it's confiscated. As to mines in the U.S., I don't think that that's going to be the case. I mean, you could own mining stocks through the Roosevelt drama. You could have mining stocks. They did quite well because the labor costs, were rock bottom at the time. You had high unemployment, so labor costs and fuel costs were low. They maintained operations. They didn't run into trouble until down the road when the gold price was fixed at 35 and it was rising overseas and inflation was clicking at 6% CPI growth a year. Those stocks ran into a lot of problems until gold was set free. Okay, so I'm not so sure that's going to be the case. And how do you combat this? Well, you spread yourself out. You have some physical gold. You have some royalty stocks, which I think are the best thing to own, which own royalties on mines all over the world. Okay, so that's another thing that's interesting. I mean, my company, for instance, is Vancouver based, but we have numerous subsidiaries, all over the world. It's a very intricate tax system. All these royalty companies are like that. We pay KPMG a lot of money to help us sort these things out. It's very common. And I have a hard time believing that when you have assets all over the planet in places that are practical, that the U.S. can nationalize that. However, maybe they can. I don't know. So be a spider, with where if you lose a leg, you can still make it back to your web.
You mentioned in passing there that you do foresee a potential of some government action that could effectively be like gold confiscation, or at least confiscating gains, that kind of thing, through taxation. What are some realistic strategies for people to employ in anticipation of that?
Well, now's your time to get involved before it's happening. Okay, so if that does happen, it's probably at much higher prices. So if you're at 1770 today, and you're looking at a scenario where there's going to be, they gotta have public outrage against gold too. They got to be able to say, like my granddad told me that the newspapers of the day wrote articles every day about how you were treasonous, to own gold and all these different things. So you have to have that build up. I mean, think about it. That was all the way through the Roaring '20s, all the way through the worst of the Depression, and it was right before the devaluation. So I mean, for us in modern times, I mean, I think you have so much runway left, right? So, I mean, you own your physical gold, you own your royalty stocks, you've got fantastic operating conditions ahead for these things, and then you'll see the sentiment turn. And the fact is, why I'm saying maybe you're best off to comply is that you don't have to go underground and become a complete criminal to hold on to something that you won't be able to let anyone know that you have for 4 decades. So, I mean, so you probably are able to say, okay, fair enough, you got me, turn it in for the higher price, move on and do something else. I think you prepare in advance, right? So like we were talking about manipulation in the market. Well, how do you combat manipulation? You buy the thing that's being manipulated if it's to the downside, or if it's being manipulated higher, then you sell the thing that's being manipulated, right? I mean, it's like, that's how you deal with manipulation. So, I mean, I think you're going to look at that type of attitude is probably the most successful way to ride this wave. And that's really, let's think about it. What are we really trying to do here? Are we trying to prove a point to the federal government? Well, that's totally ridiculous. I mean, I went to reform school in northern Idaho, and that's where Ruby Ridge happened, right? Remember Randy Weaver, Ruby
Yep.
Ridge. And in fact, the maintenance guy at my school was Randy's neighbor. It was a tragedy how that went down. My point is, there's all these groups up there that are separatist groups, very nice people. But sometimes you got to say to yourself, what good is it to sit up here in a dirt floor, killing an elk to eat, and there's nobody around? You think to yourself, okay, I mean, there's a practical side of life. Live your life, live life. Nobody has any gold in the U.S. to speak of. It's so small, the amount of people that have gold. So you're already 1,000 steps in front of your fellow man. Okay. So ride the wave and have a good time of it, because yes, there's going to be some sort of action against gold. There's going to have to be. I mean, how high does the total debt pile get? It's 275 trillion now or something. What are you going to go to a quadrillion or something? I mean, okay. How high does it get before you look at measly gold with 11 trillion total valuation in the world with no counterparty risk? It's going to go much higher. And then once it does, it's going to be a problem, because it's a truth serum for the overall system. We know this is what's going to happen. So while you're still waiting for that to happen, play that. There's your trade. And when that's over, there'll be something else to do. We don't know what it is now, but we don't need to know what it is now.
We have a question from Blues Digger 66 about what does come next, and it is speculation on our part. He says, when the systemic reset occurs, how do you start a new system without eliminating a significant portion of global debt that ruined this system? And will they use a basket of currencies with gold, silver, oil, and perhaps some other commodities to back them under a digital platform?
So, Blues Digger, it's partially correct. I mean, I don't know that they need to back it with real assets, because on the digital platform, they tell you to use it. And if you don't use it, then it doesn't, you starve. So
you don't get to transact.
Yeah, exactly right. There's no soup for you. So I mean, I think that's something to remember, is that as we transition to a blockchain currency, and I don't mean the kind of blockchains that you hear about on late night internet advertisements. I mean a government created, government controlled, closed loop blockchain, which identifies every single currency unit that the Fed creates and knows where it's spent, where it's held, and who has it at all times, and the location of the holder as well. This is the type of control that's coming. So I don't think they need to back that with any sort of asset. So you're definitely going to have a reset. You're going to have a revaluation. All right. So everything, all the debts will be revalued, and they'll favor people that are most connected to the system. People that aren't connected to the system will come second in that case. Just like right now, the Fed's buying junk bonds. And so if you and I ran a junk bond company and we issued a bunch of junk bonds and bought our stock back and increased the size of our personal empire, then the Fed buys the bond at 100 cents on the dollar when you and I both know it should be 10 cents on the dollar. That's alchemy. That's basically I mean, you just made gold, okay, out of nothing. So that's happening now. It'll certainly happen when it comes to who's going to be stuck with a full value debt and who's going to have something favorable happen during this. So that's definitely coming. I mean, how can you prepare? Well, obviously, you don't exactly know how this is going to go down. So it's very difficult to prepare. Where are the bent blades of grass? I mean, I think now you have time to capture value out of the market. So you probably have equities that you can look at if you're honest with yourself and say, this is way too rich. I mean, I'm 70 years old and I've got 80% S&P 500 in my portfolio. I mean, come on, is this really practical? Do I really want to own this thing for the twilight of my life? No, I don't. There's something else that I would be happier owning. Okay, so people need to have these frank conversations with themselves now, and then to prepare. You take your positions and you don't try to go for perfection. I mean, think about people that escaped tyranny in World War II. They weren't trying to get to Paris or wherever they were headed and to live like a king. They were trying to get there and get something to eat and a safe place to have shelter. And they knew they were going to lose, valuable art and other assets and all these things. But the reality is that they didn't lose their life. That was the deal. And they were able to restart. And some of those people became quite successful in the aftermath. How could you have forecasted what the aftermath would look like? You could not have. All you could have done in retrospect was to take steps to prepare in advance, and some of those steps would have been fruitless. Some of the things you would have done, if you were guessing what was going to happen, would have turned out to not be helpful, and you wouldn't care because you lived. You would say, so what? That I wasted, on this? It's fine. I mean, you don't know exactly what you'll need, but the key is to have multiple options. And then you come out the other side stronger than the others and able to take advantage of there will be something on the other side.
EB, this is a fascinating topic and we could keep delving into it. I know our time is up. If people want to find out about your book, remind them, and other work that you do, where can they keep informed?
Well, the book is Why Gold, Why Now? The War Against Your Wealth and How to Win It. It's available in paperback and Kindle on Amazon.com and also on Audible.com as an audio book. And I hope people will also check out Metallo Royalty and Streaming. It's New York Stock Exchange listed, ticker symbol MTA. I'm a director of that company. I've been involved in the founding and growth of that company. It's been a fantastic performer, and as gold takes off, I think people will be happy that they looked at it now instead of in the future.
And folks, I will remind you that since everything else is getting canceled, you can still attend the Sprott virtual Natural Resource Symposium, which will be online starting July 22nd. So you're going to want to check that out because they've got an amazing roster of speakers, and there's all kinds of breakout sessions and enriching presentations, panel discussions, just an amazing variety of things they're going to do, all hosted on an online platform, 24 hours a day. Starting July 22nd. So check that out. We'll put informational link in the description of this video. And EB, thank you for joining us this time again on Liberty and Finance and Reluctant Preppers.
Thanks for having me.
If you've decided that now is the right time for you to protect your family's financial future by acquiring physical precious metals, gold and silver, I'm delighted to let you know that I have now become a licensed dealer's representative for Miles Franklin, one of the oldest and most trusted names in bullion dealerships. And we can provide you with physical delivery to your personal possession or to professional vault storage or precious metals IRAs. Just email me at libertyandfinance@protonmail.com, and please include your name and phone number in your email to libertyandfinance@protonmail.com. We'll get right back with you and find out how to best meet your needs so that you can either begin or increase your acquisition of physical precious metals now and protect your family's future starting today.